On the night of July 17, 1970, 5 convicts serving life sentences made a desperate escape from Dorchester Penitentiary in New Brunswick, Canada. The escapees were John Lee Parker, age 27, Jack Fisher, 32, Sam Wetmore, 36, George Hannington, 29, and Lemuel Fleming, 41. They slipped away in the early hours around 2 a.m. after planning the breakout for months. Their goal was straightforward: get as far from the prison as possible and eventually cross into the United States, where they hoped they could blend in. After clearing the walls, they ran north, intending to turn west once they crossed the Memramcook River. They didn't know how long they had been running, but by the time the sun began to rise, they were exhausted, dehydrated, and starving. That's when they spotted a farm in the distance. From afar, the place looked worn down and lifeless. As they moved closer, the old farmhouse appeared abandoned, its walls dirty, windows cracked, and bushes around it overgrown. The barn nearby looked structurally weak, as if one strong wind could collapse it. Convinced they had found an empty refuge, the men approached cautiously, unsure whether anyone still lived there. They decided to split up. 3 men would circle around to the back door in case anyone tried to flee, while the other 2 would knock on the front door to make contact. Their plan was simple: if someone lived there, they would tie them up, grab food and water, and move on before daylight gave away their position. A few minutes later, Jack opened the back door and quietly informed the others that the house appeared empty. What they didn't know was that the nightmare was only beginning. The 5 men stepped inside the farmhouse, and the interior was even worse than the outside. Dust coated every surface, cobwebs hung from the ceiling beams, and a strong musty odor lingered in the air. It looked as though wild animals had been using the place as shelter. After rummaging through the kitchen and nearby rooms, all they managed to find were several cans of old meat and beans. The faucet didn't run, so Jack instructed Sam to search outside for a well. 10 minutes later, Sam's voice shattered the silence. "Get out here." The men rushed outside and heard Sam again, this time yelling from inside the barn. The barn doors were cracked open, and they hesitated briefly, exchanging nervous glances. Everything about the place felt wrong, but they were already committed. John entered first. The barn interior was dim, the light barely making its way through the wooden gaps. As his eyes adjusted, he saw Sam standing rigidly, his face pale and unsettled. Then, from the corner of his eye, John noticed a figure standing a few meters away. A man he stepped into clearer view, long silver hair falling past his shoulders, a deeply lined face, and eyes that stared unblinking at John. The man looked to be around 60, yet something about him felt older, much older. The rest of the convicts entered and froze. No one spoke. The air felt heavy and cold. Finally, Jack broke the silence. "Who are you, old man? Do you live here?" The stranger didn't answer. He just kept staring at John, silent and motionless. Jack repeated the question, this time more forcefully. The old man slowly turned his head toward Jack, his expression unchanging, and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "I do live here and have for a very long time." Jack didn't like being ignored, and everyone knew his temper could flare fast. He ordered Sam and George to grab a nearby chair and find rope to tie the man up. They obeyed immediately. Not wanting to provoke Jack, they dragged over an old wooden chair and used baling twine they found on the floor. The old man didn't resist, not even slightly. He simply watched Jack with a blank, unreadable stare. A cold uneasiness crawled over John. Something about the man felt wrong. His calmness wasn't natural, and his silence wasn't fear, it was something else entirely. John had grown up around violence. His father had murdered his mother when he was just 14, and he had learned early how to sense danger in a person. This man radiated it. Sam returned with the cans of food and announced that he had found a working well outside. Jack ignored the old man's eerie presence for the moment and told Sam to bring the food and water. When Sam left, the old man finally spoke again. "Let me tell you gentlemen a story. Since I may be here for a while," he began, his tone calm and strangely confident. "I was born a very long time ago in Sisteron, France. When I was a young man, about your age, something terrible happened to me. It left me unable to die. Because of that, I no longer fear death. I long for it every single day. I ask only this: leave before nightfall." His words were delivered as though he was stating a simple fact, not a threat, but the way he said it sent a chill through John. Just then, Sam walked in carrying the cans and a bucket of water, startling everyone. Jack laughed it off, but John couldn't shake the feeling that the old man wasn't crazy at all, only dangerous. The men gathered in a slightly brighter corner of the barn to eat, passing around the cans of meat and beans. They spoke casually about their plans once they reached America, trying to lighten the mood, but John couldn't relax. Every few seconds, he glanced toward the old man. The stranger was silent again, his head bowed, but his presence seemed to fill the entire barn. John's uneasiness only grew stronger. After they finished eating, Jack stood up and said someone needed to take the first watch from the loft. The surrounding land was completely open for kilometers, and traveling in daylight would risk being spotted by patrols or search teams. Moving at night gave them their best chance. They had crossed several rivers earlier and walked upstream before returning to land, hoping to confuse the dogs. George volunteered to take the first watch. The rest of the men spread out across the barn, looking for a place to lie down. Exhaustion quickly took over. John fell into a deep sleep until Lemuel shook him awake, whispering that it was his turn. If Lemuel had been on watch, John realized he must have slept for hours. John climbed up the ladder to the loft and glanced toward the old man, even tied to the chair. The stranger was staring directly at him again, expression, cold eyes unblinking. He didn't seem the least bit afraid of 5 escaped convicts. From the loft window, John could see the late afternoon light fading. Dusk would settle soon, and they would be leaving. He wondered what Jack planned to do with the old man before they moved on. John sat on a barrel the others had used as a lookout seat. Fatigue crept over him, and despite his effort to stay alert, he drifted off and suddenly jerked awake. It was nearly dark, and everything was about to go wrong. John scrambled down the ladder, heart pounding, realizing he had slept through most of his watch. The barn was dim now, only thin slivers of moonlight slipping through the warped boards. As he reached the ground, he glanced toward the old man's chair and froze. The chair was empty. The old man was gone. The baling twine they had used to tie him down lay shredded on the floor, torn apart as if by something far stronger than human hands. John's breath caught in his throat. He yelled for the others, and within seconds the men came running. Their faces changed instantly when they saw the empty chair. Sam and George had tied the old man tightly. There was simply no way he could have broken free, not without tools, not without struggling, not at his age. Yet the twine looked ripped, not cut. The barn was getting darker by the second. Shadows swallowed everything except the thin patches of moonlight. John's voice shook as he asked Jack what they should do next. Before Jack could answer, a noise echoed from one of the rooms at the rear of the barn, a slow, deliberate sound. Something moving. Lemuel spoke up quickly. "Jack, let's get out of here. We can't see anything in this place. We need to leave anyway." But Jack, stubborn and reckless as always, shook his head. "I'm not leaving without giving the old man a proper goodbye. He knows we're convicts. If you cowards won't help me, then stay here." John clenched his jaw. "Fine," he said, "but hurry." Jack stepped into the darkness at the back of the barn. There were at least 3 small rooms and several stalls. He disappeared into the shadows, the faint light swallowing him. John's nerves buzzed. Sweat ran down his back. He could barely breathe. Then a low animalistic growl echoed through the barn. Jack screamed, and then everything went silent. Panic surged through John. The growl had sounded close, far too close, and it was followed by Jack's scream filled with raw terror. Without thinking, John, Lemuel, and George bolted toward the barn doors, desperate to escape. But the doors didn't budge. They pushed, yanked, and shoved only to discover a chain and padlock had been fastened from the outside, trapping them inside. "What the hell do we do now?" George shouted, his voice trembling. "Find another way out," John yelled, scanning the walls desperately. Shadows stretched across the floor, and the sound of heavy footsteps moved swiftly around them. Each thump echoed through the dark barn, punctuated by growls and snarls. Suddenly, a chilling scream erupted. It was Sam. His blood-curdling cry filled the air, and it ended abruptly in a sickening silence. John's stomach churned as he realized what had just happened. "Come on, Johnny, move," Lemuel screamed, dragging him toward the dim light near the side wall. Panic made John almost trip over loose boards. His hands hit something soft and wet, a pool of blood. The coppery smell hit him instantly. He froze, horror striking him cold. "Jack," he called, desperate. A whisper answered him from the shadows. "Johnny, it's me. Come here." John's pulse raced. Was it really Jack? He didn't know if his friend was alive or already dead. From the loft above, another scream tore through the night. Lemuel caught again. John's mind screamed to run, but he knew staying still could be worse. Steeling himself, he crept toward the voice, his hands trembling and heart hammering in his chest. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a threat. The barn felt alive, predatory, and John knew one thing with terrifying certainty. Something in that place was hunting them. John inched toward the voice, each step slow and cautious, his senses on high alert. The dim moonlight filtering through the cracked boards barely illuminated the barn, but it was enough to reveal the chaos left behind: fallen boards, scattered straw, and patches of blood. He stumbled over something and froze, realizing it was Sam's body, or what remained of it. The sight made his stomach churn, and a cold dread settled deep into his bones. "Johnny, over here," the voice whispered again. It was Jack, his arm bloody and torn from some unseen force. John rushed forward, feeling the barn closing in around him, shadows stretching and twisting unnaturally. The air smelled metallic and acrid, thick with fear and something else, something wild. He found Jack lying half-crouched near a weak patch of wall, the splintered wood barely letting in enough light to see outside. John grabbed Jack's arm and tried to pull him up. The pain on Jack's face was unmistakable, but the man gritted his teeth, refusing to scream again. Behind them, a low growl rumbled, vibrating through the floor and walls, reminding John that whatever had killed Sam was still close. They searched frantically for an exit, The barn seemed to shift around them. Every corner brought more darkness, more uncertainty. Finally, near a corner of the structure, John spotted a weak panel slightly ajar. They forced it open, inch by inch, scraping nails and wood splinters in the process. Light began to spill in, signaling the way out. Bloodied, exhausted, and terrified, they squeezed through the narrow opening. The cold night air hit their faces, and for the first time since entering the farm, they felt a small measure of relief. But the screams, the growls, and the nightmare inside the barn would haunt them forever. John knew one truth: not everyone had made it out alive. Once outside, John helped Jack along, careful not to let him collapse. Jack's injuries were severe. His left arm was mangled and bleeding heavily. The night was long, and the convicts moved quickly, weaving through fields and woods, trying to retrace the path they had taken from the prison. Every rustle in the bushes, every distant animal cry, made John jump. He kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting the creature or the old man to appear at any moment. They walked for hours, under the cover of darkness, until dawn began to lighten the sky. Finally, they reached a busy road, hoping to flag down someone for help. Their exhausted, disheveled appearance immediately drew attention. Soon the police were alerted, and within a short time John and Jack were in custody again. Jack, miraculously alive, was rushed to medical care. Despite the damage to his arm, he survived, though he ultimately required amputation of his left arm due to the injuries sustained in the barn. Meanwhile, John recounted the harrowing story to the prison warden. He described the abandoned farm, the old man, and the violent attacks on Sam Lemuel and George. The warden notified the local authorities, who immediately went to investigate the site. Inside the barn, investigators found a chilling scene. The smell was like an animal den. In the loft, the old man was sitting calmly in a chair, reading a book as if nothing had happened. When asked who he was, he simply asked, "What took you so long?" The search revealed a hidden room beneath one of the barn's floors, containing the remains of dozens of people, including the missing convicts Sam and Lemuel. Some bones were old, others bore fresh tissue. George's body was never found. The authorities later speculated that as many as 100 bodies may have been on the property. The old man, never revealing his real name, became known simply as the Old Man. Investigators also searched the farmhouse itself, uncovering old belongings that dated back centuries. Among the items was a photograph of the old man as a young man. Experts confirmed it was taken in France during the 1850s, matching the timeline the old man had described to John. How he came to live on the farm, which had supposedly been abandoned for 30 years, remained a mystery. The old man was arrested and charged with the suspected murders of Sam Wetmore, George Hannington, and Lemuel Fleming. During questioning, he never outright denied the events John had recounted. When the warden asked him whether the story was true, he simply said, "I don't deny it." Jack's account of the events corroborated John's story. His injuries matched the violent struggle described, and the missing limbs and bloodied barn confirmed the horror that had occurred. John, when asked what he believed killed the other men, gave a single, chilling answer: a werewolf. The term struck fear even into seasoned authorities, though they struggled to make sense of it. Over the following month, authorities conducted an extensive search of the entire property. They discovered evidence suggesting the old man had been involved in murders spanning decades. While they could never fully confirm the total number of victims, it was clear that the farm had been a site of long-standing horror. Jack survived, but the trauma of the night lingered. John's life was changed forever as well. The terror, the screams, and the shadow of the old man haunted his thoughts long after his capture. The farm itself remained abandoned for years, but locals would occasionally report a strange older man wandering its edges, standing silently and disappearing back into the surrounding trees. No one knew the old man's real name, and his true origins and abilities remained shrouded in mystery. Even in prison, his presence carried an almost otherworldly weight. In 1984, the old man vanished from prison under mysterious circumstances. Despite a thorough search, he was never found. Rumors spread among locals and law enforcement alike. Some claimed to have seen a silver-haired figure wandering the outskirts of the old farm property, standing silently among the trees before vanishing into the forest. Others whispered that he was immortal, a man untouched by time, living far beyond natural human limits. The farm remained abandoned, but it retained a reputation for darkness and fear. Locals avoided the property, and tales of unexplained noises, shadows, and sudden disappearances kept the legend alive. The story of John Lee Parker and the others became a chilling cautionary tale. 5 escaped convicts, bold and desperate, had stumbled into something far more dangerous than the law. Jack Fisher, despite losing his arm, continued to recount the events to authorities. His account confirmed the brutality of what had transpired that night. John Lee Parker's recounting, too, painted a vivid picture of terror, and both men's testimonies left investigators shaken. The old man's calm demeanor, his unnatural strength, and the sheer violence in the barn defied explanation. The hidden room in the barn, filled with human remains, suggested decades of murder. Some of the bones were old, others were surprisingly fresh, Experts speculated there could have been up to 100 victims, including some whose bodies were never recovered. George Hannington, one of the escapees, was never found. Even after all these years, the legend of the old man endures. His nickname persists in stories, a reminder of the horrors lurking in abandoned places. John's final remark to the warden summed up the fear and mystery. A werewolf killed the others. Whether supernatural or human, the old man's legacy is one of terror, survival, and the unknown, a dark chapter in Canada's criminal history that continues to haunt imaginations to this day.